forgot to plug in my microphone, man, here. I don't even know if I have sound. Yes, well, okay. Now I have my microphone in, so now for sure I should have sound. Nothing but professionalism. Speaking about nothing but professionalism, clickbaity titles. Yeah, that's fine. Why not? Just, do whatever you got to do to get attention. Who cares, right? So, what atheism gets wrong? Oh, man. Oh, we get stuff wrong. Oh, no. Here we go.
Thing that atheists get wrong. But before we talk about it, we need to define our terms and say what
atheism gets wrong? But first,
is an atheist. Well, atheist comes from the Greek atheos. It simply means without God. Now, if that's all it meant, and it technically does, it just means someone who doesn't have a God or God. They don't believe in one particular God or gods. And if that was the case, I would count myself as an atheist because I don't have a particular God that I believe is actually true. I've never been convinced that any specific deity is the one.
Yeah, that is what the word means, technically speaking. And yet the definition for this word has evolved through time because natural language changes over time. And there are two definitions for this word atheist. The root word doesn't matter so much anymore. That is where it came from. That is what it meant, but it isn't what it means now. That's just, again, natural language. So right now, it has two parts. One is a more classical stance that you would find in maybe academia, is there is no God. And then the second one that has become the zeitgeist of the word, which is I don't believe in God, which is a different statement than saying there is no God. Regardless, it is without God, and that is all it is to be an atheist. Anything you add to that is something extra that isn't necessarily anything to do with your atheism, because all that you need to do to be an atheist is not believe in God.
Or that there is any at all. But a lot of atheists, and I would say the majority of people who self-identify as atheists, they make a few claims. They make claims that that there has never been and is not anything that could be considered a god or gods.
Okay, so you've made a claim that many, whatever that means, atheists make the following claim with no citation. How do you know what atheists have claimed without something to point to show that that is in fact the truth? Do you have a wide-scale survey of atheists that have asked them, do you make this, that, or the other claim? No? Well, then how do you know that many atheists have made this claim? I suspect that you don't know this, but you believe this to be true based on your personal interactions or observations of atheists, which is not peer-reviewed study. It is not, anything at all. It's just a statement that you're making that is unsupported. Maybe you shouldn't do that.
They make a claim that, no matter what God or God's what system, none of them are real. They generally claim that there is no such thing as an afterlife. When you die, you die. Now, I probably believe this too, but I don't know it. And the third thing they often claim is that they're evangelical about atheism. They think that everybody should be an atheist and it would solve a lot of problems.
Again, you have nothing to show that this is indeed what many atheists have said. How many, if we had a study of, say, 10,000 atheists that asked them a questionnaire, said, here, answer these questions, and then we could compile those answers, give a margin of error, and have that at least for something, and say the majority of these atheists that took this survey said X, Y, and Z. And we can extrapolate something from that survey. Of course, the more people you ask, the better your results will be and that sort of thing. But you don't have that. So you're just saying this is true. But so what? What many atheists do in fact say doesn't mean anything at all in terms of atheism on its own. You're confusing things. So Christians will say, some Christians will say homosexuality is a sin, and some won't say anything at all, and a very few might say it's fine to be gay. And it's like, well, what study do I have of that? I can find examples of that, I suppose. But you can be skeptical of that idea. But at any rate, the amount that say X, Y, or Z doesn't mean that that's what Christianity is about. So this is just kind of like, well, a lot of the people say this thing. So that's not atheism getting things wrong, because atheism isn't a thing in that sense. It's not a worldview. And it's just people that are atheists are doing this thing. Okay. So it should be what, it's like, well, atheists get this wrong. The atheists say there is no afterlife. Okay, yeah. And there's no evidence for an afterlife, that's for sure. And there is evidence that shows that when the brain isn't doing anything, that there is no you there. So that's it. So a way to save some time and energy might just be to say, when you're dead, you're dead. And that seems like a reasonable conclusion to make based on the evidence that we have. But you're saying, well, you're not allowed to do that, or you don't want people to do that. Okay, fine. I understand. You want people to be more specific with their language. You could have shortened this to say, look, let's try to avoid making claims when we don't have evidence to support those claims. But we do have evidence in this one case. Or, be careful of how you phrase your statements. But that wouldn't have gotten any views, so we're not going to do that.
They believe that atheism is a solution to the problems that religion creates.
I don't have any idea about that. Religion does cause some problems, and maybe it tries to address some problems as well. Although, does it create more problems than it addresses? It's hard to say. Without religion, the world would look different. There would not be fighting over a tiny piece of land just because it's holy. There'd be other reasons to fight over that piece of land, but not unless it was valuable in some intrinsic way, not just because it's holy and special and sacred, and magical or mystical. Now, people are odd creatures, and I'm thinking of the mound, the rock on the the temple thing in Jerusalem that they're always fighting over, this little piece of land. They'd be like, well, we had this first. It'd be like claims of it's ours, it's ours, it's ours, and it's like a fight over just who owns it just because. And that's not very logical, but people would fight over it. But it wouldn't be based on, that it's holy, at least. So it wouldn't necessarily solve the problem, but it would change it. And since it's not holy, maybe now we can negotiate. Because when you have it being holy and God gave us this, then you can't really question that. You can't really negotiate that. You can't really compromise on that because God gave it to you, and that's it. God said it, that settles it. And so there's no room for negotiation to take place. But when it's something like, well, we had it first, or we had it longer, well, there's some negotiation that can take place. You can actually look at the facts of the matter and say, okay, you guys had it for X amount of time. We had it for this amount of time. And maybe we can share. You know, we get this amount percentage, you get this amount of percentage, or whatever. But you can't do that when things are holy. So getting rid of religion, and that would have to be organic. It wouldn't have to, we could not do it forced because that would be the wrong way to go about it. It'd have to be that people voluntarily give up on religion and give up on the supernatural ideas, give up on the magical ideas, give up on superstitions and things of that nature, and give up on magical thinking, broadly speaking. That certainly would change the world. And that, yes, would also mean that people were atheists. But it's not atheism fixes things. It's that modifying our behavior to accept reality as it is would change things for the better. But again, you know, if you said it that way, you wouldn't get the sort of flack and comments that you would want from a video like this. And that's not going to get you engagement, and that's not going to get you views. So it's much better to just say it as you did. Yeah, go you.
And, you know, whether it's war, hatred, all these things. And anyone who lived through 2020 knows that you don't need religion for any of those things. For dehumanization, for war. The atheists trusted the science, and they dehumanized tons of people. And of course, if you look at the history of the Soviet Union, et cetera, all the communist countries, they're great at doing murder and war without God. They don't really need it to make it happen. So
this is known as whataboutism. What about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? What about 2020 when people just believed the science? What does that mean? Believe the science? I don't know. But yeah, it seems like this guy has some bones to pick with what happened during the pandemic, you know. We did the best that we knew how to do. And did leaders make the wrong choices? Looking back, maybe, yeah. Did they make those choices with the best knowledge that they had at the time? Hopefully so. Who knows? Did we overcorrect? Oh, yeah. Mistakes were made, and hopefully we'll learn from them. But did atheists believe the science, or did just people, generally speaking, accept that this sounds like good scientific advice? Whether it is or isn't, it sounds good, doesn't harm us to do it. Well, it does harm us to some degree in some way, but would not doing it have made it worse? Who knows? Hard to say. But this is all a whataboutism. Well, look, see, those atheists who value reason, they were unreasonable here, therefore something. Well, humans are unreasonable. That has nothing to do with whether there is or isn't a God. So what are you complaining about? Oh, we followed the science. What? Okay, so that's bad? And then, oh, look, remember these guys, they were without religion. They did bad stuff. So see, it doesn't always turn out well, even though they followed their own set of beliefs. Maybe it's following beliefs that aren't grounded in reality that's bad. And had we had the time and energy and stuff to really study on the effectiveness on masks and whether or not that would, decrease the likelihood of spreading a virus, then we would have been able to make a better decision on how we went about that. Seems to me like, yeah, it worked. Maybe it didn't work as well as it could have. Maybe it didn't work 100%. Maybe it was better than nothing. Maybe it was the social, maybe a lot of things. But you're complaining about it doesn't mean that there is or isn't a God. And it also doesn't mean that that this is a problem that we just accepted the information that was given to us. And you're assuming that people didn't question that information, didn't look into it, didn't investigate it further and find, hey, this is a good idea. Oh, well,
So it's really not a good argument. So those are 3 points that most people who describe themselves as atheists often make. And the problem that atheists have is that they claim to know something that is unknowable. And in each case, that's the truth. And is it possible for me, as a man standing here in the middle of the desert in Arizona, is it possible for me to know in the entire scope of the universe and billions of years that there has never been a God or anything that can be considered a God that people might have recognized as a God? Is it possible for me to know that? Absolutely not. There is no way I can know that. I can't make a claim that I can say I don't think that probably is true, or I don't think it happened that way, or I don't think that your God is real. Now, I can definitely say that. That's a belief. But I don't know anything. I don't know that that's not true. And the same thing is true with afterlife. I suspect that there is no such thing as an afterlife. Now, can I know that? No, because I've never been dead.
And we have evidence for a lot of things. We have evidence that all gods have been made by humans, for humans. And that every single claim about God, if put to any sort of test, has failed to do anything. God has consistently not known anything that humans couldn't already know or figured out. And God is subject to the time and culture of the people that created that God. So it's pretty reasonable to say that there isn't a God. Also, the fact that people can't agree on what God is hints at that the word is incoherent and has no real meaning other than the meanings that we assign to it. And since nobody can agree on that, it's probably made up. As far as there never being a God, well, that runs into the same problem of what God is in the first place. If somebody has sufficient technology, could they be considered a God? I don't know. Depends what you think what God is or isn't. Right now, humans, we can create life, but we need some stuff to do it. So if we've got a few $1 million lying around, give me some, just 10, 20,000, that'll be good. 50,000, yeah, 100,000 would be fine. $500,000. If you got a few, you could probably afford it. Anyways, but if you had some money lying around and you want to open up a scientific experimental factory where you got a bunch of semen and a bunch of eggs, and you just have those eggs and semen being fertilized as fast as possible by the machines. You're just creating life, every second, if you will, until you run out of eggs, which you'd run out of eggs before sperm. But at any rate, and then you go, well, now that I've done this, I'm just gonna, there's a giant hydraulic press that's really fast, and I'm just gonna crush them. And then you do, and you go and you release all that footage to the news and the world, and you go, okay, did I commit mass murder? Good luck figuring that out. I paid for the eggs, I paid for the sperm, I paid for the location. Did I just commit mass murder in what I just did here? and people, oh man, the debate on that would go for, And the point I'm making is, it's not like super simple to just say yes or no to that. What kind of logic would we apply there? This person's done something really bizarre. Is it a crime against humanity? Is it a waste of time and resources? Well, they were theirs to waste. So, they didn't learn anything from it, but who cares? Again, they weren't trying to. They were just saying, hey, look, I did this thing. You guys decide if what I did was bad or not, right? So you can make a statement on that and say they were wrong. And that statement is correct to make, even though what you mean by they were wrong is subjective to you, the person. And people who want there to be objective morality or think that there is objective morality might say, no, killing is wrong, says so. My God told me that. Although somebody else's God might say killing is okay as long as it's under certain conditions. Well, but I can counter back and say, well, wait a minute, you're going off of what your book says. Don't you think that those innocent souls, what happened to them? Well, they're in paradise now. So then I did something good. So, it's not a simple question to answer of whether this hypothetical person that, did this weird experiment, did they commit mass murder? Yes or no? Well, what's the law say? And they need to have legal experts going over that. But you could say they were wrong, and that would be true. It would be true for you and your ethical system. Would it be true for everyone? Different question. Not necessarily. Ethical systems vary from person to person, group to group. So if I say there's no God, and there's never been a God, and there never will be a God, well, that's based on the idea that I have about God, which is every single time that word has been used has been applied to a group of people or a singular person that says God is X, Y, and Z and doesn't demonstrate that that's the case, just says that that's what it is without any proof at all. And so I have every reason to say no to that, because that's been the constant pattern throughout time. So my conclusion that yeah, there's not a God, there's not going to be a God because the word is incoherent, has no real meaning, is true. And to try to simplify something complex sometimes is very difficult, and sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes it's somewhere in between. But my point is, what you're doing is just whataboutism. And what you're doing here is saying, well, you, the pretend person that doesn't really exist, have said this thing in a way that I think is inappropriate, but you don't know because you don't have that example, and you haven't really thought through all the steps that would make that statement appropriate for them to say. Anyways, so the whataboutism on that crushing, recently created fetuses, I hope that you spend some time and energy figuring that one out in your response video to this video that I'm sure you'll make. Probably you won't, but
So that is another claim about something, about knowing something which is unknowable. And of course, we already talked about the claim that, it would end war and hatred, which is simply just verifiably not true. So those are three claims that atheists get.
Whoa, okay. It would certainly end the hatred of people due to religious reasons. So that's true. But you don't know that it wouldn't end. I mean, it would end certain hatred, but not all hatred. But again, these are all ideas that you are complaining about that you have no examples of and no proof of. and no inference to, no citations at all. So this is what's known as a straw man.
Wrong, because of this bigger thing of saying that they have a lock on objective truth. And you could get into this idea of rationalism, where they believe that through science they can find the answers to all things, and then no.
Again, you're just saying stuff at this point. I myself don't know that we could find the answers to everything. But yes, science does appear to be the best thing that we humans have come up with as a methodology, a tool, a way of scrutinizing and examining the world. And the thing is, I find with people that have kind of an anti-science bent, which I suspect this guy has since he was complaining about masks earlier, is that they trust some science, but not other science. Whatever science is convenient for them, they'll trust. Whatever science seems inconvenient for them, they won't trust.
Know all things. But if we're ever going to do that as a species, it's a long way off. We're not even close to being there. So I prefer to concern myself with things that we can actually know and we can actually affect in our own lives, and not worry about if in a million years or 100,000 years or some beyond human scope of time, level of time, if we're going to find something out or know something different.
You say you concern yourself with things that you can fix as you talk about things that people do that you might not be able to fix. But being a hypocrite isn't a logical fallacy. I'm just pointing it out.
I'm not going to, I only have a short time here on this earth. I'm not going to concern myself with that. I'm not going to argue with people. Do you know that about these things that nobody can know? Why?
Then why make the video? You are spending time and energy to make a video talking about, hey, don't say things that are true that you can't prove that are true. Also, by the way, I don't want to waste time doing the very thing that I'm saying not to do. Again, being a hypocrite isn't logically fallacious. It's just a bad look.
I would argue about that. And the interesting thing is that this is not just about atheists. The reason why a lot of men convert to religions or try religions on, because there are a lot of people right now trying different religions on. And the reason that I think that they're doing that.
A lot of people trying religions on. Citation. You got any citation for hello? You got any citation for that? No? Oh, okay. Just yeah, sure.
Is because they're looking for objective truth. We had all these social institutions in the world. We had, like the media, we had the universities, we had science, all these things that claim to have a lock on objective truth. And of course, they really didn't.
They claim that they have objective truth? Really? Can we get a citation of that? Please show me the university that has claimed to have objective truth. The science, whatever that is, that claims to have objective truth. By all means, demonstrate that your statement is true. Nah, we're not going to do that.
They had some data and they had some interpretations of things. And,
yeah, they just had some data. But they interpreted that data the wrong way. Because you know how to interpret data, right?
They also had fallible human beings who can be corrupted, lying to all of us.
They had corrupted human beings that were lying to all of us. Wow. Or they had people that could be corrupted, but they were definitely lying to us. About what? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, who? Where? When? Be specific. Of course, this is a giant tangent from atheists get stuff wrong to just humans getting stuff wrong. But let's conflate atheism with, well, atheism and humans. I mean, okay, yeah, but let's conflate what atheists and accepting this other thing over here that you don't like to do with COVID-19 and the all that, and just your grumbles about the world, all is just mishmashed together. Like, oh man, it's.
So people were looking for, well, if that's not the truth, what is it? Where is objective truth? And so all.
What are you talking about? Objective truth. So truth to me just means whatever is real. And so you don't need to say objective truth, because truth already is objective in my view. But, again, natural language. How do you know that people are looking for objective truth? I don't know.
All these religions claim to have objective truth. We know what right and wrong is.
Do all religions claim to have objective truth? Or are there some that don't make that claim? Depends. I don't know,
We know what's really true, and truth with a capital T. They always make it a capital T. It's a thing.
Oh, yeah, that I agree with.
We know this. And so it's very appealing. I want to know the answers, right? Cicero wrote about that. You're like, well, of course we want to know more. We want to know things. We feel foolish if we don't know things, right? So we try to find out more about the world. And so if someone says, hey, I have a lock on objective truth, yeah, that sounds great, right?
I don't know that I have the lock or the key or whatever to objective truth, but I do know that I have a methodology, and so far nobody's presented me with a better methodology to utilize. My methodology is fairly simple, and I think you could apply it. If I don't have empirical evidence and or a repeatable test and or a valid and sound argument, then I am skeptical of the conclusion, whatever that conclusion might be. And so to explain that more, empirical evidence is any evidence that can be observed, verified through some sort of visual phenomenon. Now, that doesn't mean just the naked eye. You can do it with telescopes, microscopes, thermal imaging, any way that you can actually visualize the phenomenon at hand would count as empirical evidence. Then, of course, you have repeatable testing, which means controlled tests applied to the idea to have a win condition and a fail condition. So somebody says, I can tell when somebody is behind a door. You set up a double-blind test, or you have people behind a door and not behind a door. And if they get it right every single time, then they can do it. And if they don't get it right every time, then they can't do it. And if they get it right more often than they get it wrong, well, that shows us something, but it didn't show that they could really do what they said that they could do. Maybe they're just very lucky. So you run it again and again until you find the results. And whenever, of course, that sort of testing has been done to paranormal, psychic, ESP sort of stuff or supernatural claims, the claim just vaporizes. So that suggests that those things aren't really real. And then, of course, we have a valid and sound argument. Really, if the argument's sound, you don't need to say the valid part, but I say valid and sound argument just because it's just what I do. I don't know. If you have a sound argument, great, cool, wonderful. That's an argument with at least two premises and a conclusion. And to make it sound, it has to be free of logical fallacies. There is a limit with logic, but regardless, if you had that, then I could agree with your idea. If you don't have empirical evidence, repeatable test, or a lot of a sound argument, I'm going to be skeptical of your conclusion, which means I'm not saying that it's true. I'm not saying that it's false. I'm saying it stays here until I get more information. And usually for me, when I look at arguments made by various people about various things, I'm just pointing out logical fallacies and saying, well, here's a reason why I have to be skeptical of your conclusion. And so if you're willing or able to correct that logical fallacy, then you can revise your argument, and I can say, oh, okay, well, now I'm not skeptical of it. But in this case, this guy has had at least one, if not more, logical fallacies, mainly straw man, but also construct straw man, and also whataboutism, and some equivocation, some tangents. Tangents not really a fallacy per se. Of course, as I said, being a hypocrite isn't a logical fallacy, but it is something of note. So these are things that make me have to be skeptical of your conclusion. So if you fix these errors, then I don't have to be skeptical of your conclusion anymore. Now, like I said, this is a mid-sized dive, and what that means is I'm done with this video. He's got more to say, but I'm done with it. He made a response video to the many angry atheists that responded to his video. Okay, so he doesn't really do that very much, but he does say something really interesting that I wanted to highlight. So let's do that, shall we?
And also often wrong. 2020 exposed a lot of people who said that they were critical thinkers and clearly were not. If you don't believe in God, but you went and, wore masks for 2 years and got vaccinated and boosted and all these things, you didn't question that?
Okay, so I'm no scientist. The 2020, if you were a so-called critical thinker, but you did X, Y, and Z, then you're not really a critical thinker. Well, being a critical thinker, you're not going to be perfect at it, first of all, but okay. If you wore a mask for 2 years, if you got the shots, the vaccination, and the boosters, then you're not really a critical thinker. If you do these things, okay, so if you, let's see how does that work? So if that means I wore a mask for 1.5 years, I got the vaccination, but I didn't get the boosters, am I still a critical thinker? So basically, he doesn't like that stuff that happened, and at some level, he doesn't believe that was effective. I'm not going to debate him on the efficiency of that. I'm not a scientist. I can't go into all the details. It seems to me that it worked. I got the first shot, the one that was split in 2 parts. There was another one that wasn't split in 2 parts, but I got the one that was. It made me feel sick the first time. I stayed in bed the entire day. And then the next time I got it made me sick again, stayed in bed. That was it. And no, I didn't get the boosters and, all that. Because by the time that all of that was around, it was no longer mandatory to get those things. And so I was like, well, I don't know if I need these things. I don't know that I don't need these things, but I don't know, and doesn't really seem like I need to do it, so it's a risk, and I took that risk. Now, if you didn't take that risk, maybe you're better informed than I am. Maybe you're like, hey, the government, you need to go get those shots. Now they have different ones, so I don't know. I might be fine, I might not be fine. Who knows? Flu shots that are every year. Some people get them, some people don't. I don't. But that puts me possibly at risk for getting the flu. But enough people get it to make us safe. So whether you get it or not is a personal choice, and whether that choice is informed or not is another question. And whether or not we all should do it, maybe we all should. Maybe it should be a requirement by law. We all just do it, and that's it. I don't know. But we like personal autonomy and personal freedom, so we don't have those things ingrained by law. But it does seem like this guy just doesn't like that we were forced to wear the masks and forced to get these shots, or they tried to force us in certain ways, but not, people were able to avoid it. Of course, some people made themselves a nuisance while avoiding it, but basically he doesn't trust that aspect of science and feels like if you did trust it, then somehow that makes you non-critical. So, yeah. So I think that this is a combination complaint. I don't like that people claim to have the objective truth. Whether people are or are not making that claim, who knows? But he seems to have something against atheists in some way, shape, or form, even though he says he is one. So it seems like he really has an axe to grind against the whole vaccination and mask thing. And that's something that if you know the science and you know it really well, and you know it well enough to have read and understood the scientific papers on it, write your own paper. And if you can get it cited and reviewed, and if you can get it published and all that, and maybe you will actually succeed in showing how wrong people were, and then you get to talk about it as an authority. Until you do that, I don't care. You're just a dude that says stuff, just like me. I'm just saying stuff. But I'm pointing out the illogic that you're using here is I don't like X. When people did X, by the way, I don't know if people did X, but it made me upset, so I'm going to complain about it. Which is fine, but you're also complaining that people say stuff they can't know as you say stuff that you can't know because you didn't do any of the research to show that this is what people did for what reasons they did it. You don't know that all the atheists got the booster shots, got the vaccination, did the mask for however long they did it. You don't know that. You're just saying that. So, I suspect that, hypothetically, some people did it just to, just to cooperate, just to get by because the airline said to do it, or the concert said you had to do it in order to go to the concert or whatever. So they just did it just to get whatever. Okay, I'll do it. And they didn't look into any of the science. Some people did look into the science. Some people decided, the hell with the science, I'm going to do what I want to do anyway. Some people said, okay, yeah, the science is on this side, I'm going to do it. And some people just were like, okay, whatever, I'll, flip a coin or whatever, I don't know. You don't know. But, so, I guess you just, it's weird. It's weird what you're doing. And my only thought is that, well, maybe you did it to get attention, but hey, it's YouTube. Of course we're doing it to get attention. I want attention. We all want attention, right? We want people to watch our stuff. We want people to listen to us and hear what we have to say. And complaining about stuff, that's fine. But I don't know why rope in atheists into this. You could have just said humans. That works. Humans are weird. We say stuff that we think is true but isn't true. We believe stuff that isn't true but we think is true. We comply when we shouldn't comply. We don't comply when we should have, vice versa. And we stumble through life, and we're clever enough to survive. And that's why we're still here trying to figure things out. It's a constant fight against entropy until the bitter end, and then you're dead. And well, I don't know. I guess we're just dead. I don't really know for sure, but it seems like that's what the answer is. And I don't like when people make logical fallacies. And he says in this response video that he made, where he answers questions, he says, I know I made a straw man, or he says, like, I made a small straw man. And I'm like, well, why do that? if you know what it was, why? He said, I strawmanned a bit, but he said that. And I'm like, well, if you knew that you did, why do that in the first place? If you know you're making a straw man, don't do it. I don't understand that. And then, of course, he's trying to justify the clickbait title. Let's just say it's a clickbait title. Okay, we understand that. I get it. But I gave you some attention, and maybe that's what you ultimately wanted. But I do think that it has more to do with this axe to grind that you have against the vaccinations and the masks. And not really anything to do with atheists per se, but maybe against people that say they have the objective truth. But if that's the case, then demonstrate that people are claiming they have the objective truth. And then go after those people or groups that do that. Demonstrate that it's true that X group has said they have the objective truth, and then complain about it. But don't just say that people do it and complain about it. Then I'll have hopefully no reason to be skeptical of your conclusion, because you will have given me the evidence to know that what you're talking about is real, and then I can agree with you. But you haven't done that in these videos, and so I have to be skeptical of your conclusion. All right. God TV Radio, the Brett Keane Show. You can email me at deconvertedman1@gmail.com. This goes for everybody as well. If you want to set up a time and day to speak, to talk about whatever, to, either interview each other or now debates. I don't think anyone would actually debate me at this point, because I take debate very seriously, and the requirements I would have for debate, I don't think anyone would agree to. So I'm not even going to offer debate as an option, really. But if you want to talk to me and we can have a conversation about stuff, let me know, email, and we'll go from there. deconvertedman1@gmail.com. Put that in chat. Never met too many atheists that know anything about science. They talk a lot but can't discuss it. I mean, okay, that might be true. I'll say it. I don't know. I know very, very little about science, broadly speaking. I'm not a scientist. I'm a logistician. I'm an amateur logistician, because I haven't been paid to be a logistician yet. But if somebody pays me, then I can say I'm a professional logistician. Nobody's going to pay me. All right, that's it. That's all I got for now. He didn't have any empirical evidence, repeatable tests, or valid and sound argument, but he did have at least one logical fallacy of straw man, and also I think he kind of maybe has an axe to grind with the whole, booster shots and vaccines and all that. And, I don't know, whatever. Until next time, be skeptical, and after next time, well, stay skeptical. I mean, why would you not be skeptical? That would be bad, probably.